Hello and welcome to the Yukon Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm your host, Carrie Johnston, and this is a series all about how Yukon business owners are pivoting their businesses during the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm joined today by Katie. Katie, please introduce yourself.
Hi, Carrie. So good to see you again. So Katie Johnson, I am a member of the Kluane First Nation, also a member of the Wolf Clan, and my traditional name is Lasänmą. And yeah, just really, really honored to connect with you today.
Well, thanks so much for joining in. And can you just tell us a little bit about what it is that you do for business?
So, Carrie, I probably for the last 15 years, I've owned event consulting business, which has been an incredible journey for me. And I'm also co-founder of the Adäka Cultural Festival. And so, yeah, I'm like a community builder, event planner, like I kind of do it all.
And what is Adäka?
So Adäka started in 2011, and it's co-founded with Charlene Alexander. And so when there's a big history to it. We started working on the 2010 Vancouver Olympics. And so we worked on both performing and visual arts programming. And through that incredible platform, we decided to create a Yukon First Nation Indigenous Arts Festival that features performing artists, visual artists, knowledge keepers, elders, youth. And so we're really excited because we're going to be launching this year's festival because we had to cancel the last 2 years of the Adäka Cultural Festival because of this pandemic.
And who do you serve? Are you primarily focused in events here in the territory, or?
Well, I think I do have a company called Bella Elite Consulting. And so that was one of the things that obviously was very hugely impacted by the COVID pandemic. As you know, everything got shut down. There was restrictions on capacity, lost a lot of contracts during that time, but also not lost the relationships that we currently have here in the Yukon and across the North. And so just before COVID, I was doing conferences, forums, very like special elite events. And of course, my passion of just continuing on with the Adäka Cultural Festival. And so I had just before or right after COVID hit, I was of course working with Yukon First Nation Culture and Tourism. It's an organization that started in 1994 with cultural and tourism leaders. And it's an organization that I'm just I love and I'm very passionate about, and it has a mandate for art, culture, and of course, tourism. And so I just really parked my business and said, you know what, I'm going to really just focus in on the work that I have, the very important work that I have with YFNCT. And so I'm currently the director of programs and partnerships there, and of course the existing producer for the Adäka Cultural Festival.
In that role with YFNCT, what have you observed about how has the pandemic impacted those businesses?
Well, when it first started, we were all like, okay, is this going to end? There was so much uncertainty. And I feel like our team at YFNCT, we didn't stand by and say, okay, what's going to happen? We were like, it's like we didn't really skip a beat. We just kind of, I guess, went in crisis mode. Like, how can we help visual arts artists? How can we continue? Because we knew that we weren't going to be able to host any events. And so during that time, YFNCT launched the Yukon Arts Brand, which is like, it was almost like real alignment. And so the Yukon First Nation brand is really about highlighting Indigenous Yukon First Nation artists here in the Yukon. And to also for the buyers. Well, so we have marketing collateral that has this beautiful, it's like a stamp saying, you know, what you buy here is authentic. and it's bought by Yukon First Nation artists. And so just when the pandemic started, we launched this arts brand. And through this arts brand, I think we have more than 65 plus artists signed up for this brand. And you'll probably see it at some of the jewelry that you probably have purchased, is this beautiful black box with this beautiful logo that sort of marks that it's an authentic Yukon First Nation artist that created it. And through that brand, we started an online store. And so YFN Arts is where you can go. And we have this incredible online store that has we have drums, we have shawls, we have beautiful beaded work, like the earrings that I'm wearing. We have close to probably 70 to 80 artists artwork on this store. And so it's something that we never thought the leadership or the board would think, okay, let's do an online store, but it was well, let's do this store to help artists, because they weren't able to go to markets. They weren't able to go to festivals to sell their artwork. And it was just something that we can at least do to support visual arts and craft the community during this time.
What was your first memory of the pandemic when you realized this was going to be a really significant event?
Honestly, because I'm super optimistic when it comes to life and work, and because as you know, Carrie, my work is not, it's a calling for me. It's my work that I'm where am I going to go next? How am I going to do this? It's never a career step for me. It's so I was always optimistic, but it was when things started shutting down, restrictions and rules that, of course, that was needed to protect Yukoners and protect our elders and our families. But it was when we had to cancel the first Adäka Cultural Festival. I think that was a hard one, because I was we still put our heart and soul into it, and we changed it because this in the last 10 years, it's always been Yukon First Nations first that have taken part in the festival, but we invite artists from British Columbia, and late in the last couple of years, it's been across Canada. So we were okay, well, let's just have a Yukon gathering. We won't invite any artists out for this year. And so we really and we were super COVID planning, and we put a lot of energy into it. As you know, I think I called you a few times to get advice, and just to make sure that the health and safety was our number one priority. And we had to cancel it. So that was a hard one, I think, for our team to be wow, this is, I always took it seriously, but it was this is heartbreaking. We as Indigenous First Nation people, we can't even gather. That was a real moment for me. But then it was reboot, let's keep on going. And we kept on planning for the next year's festival. Even more restrictions, really being mindful, thinking and hopeful that it was going to get better. And then there was an outbreak in the community, and it was it's not oh, let's risk it. It's oh, let's not. We got to be very careful that we don't host this event and then people get COVID or bring it back to their community.
Mm-hmm. Which of the public health measures have been the most challenging for you as a business owner?
Well, definitely the capacity. If you're an event planner and if you can only have 10 people in a room, that's pretty much what was the huge, that was definitely one of them. The masks, that stuff didn't really, for me, didn't really impact me. It was really about the capacity. And then of course our borders shut down. So we couldn't even leave the territory, or anyone could come up here. So everything just shut down. And that's part of the reason why, for my business, Bella Elite, it was just wow, at this point, there's really no where to go unless I was to seriously pivot and go into like virtual programming. But I wasn't there. My gifts in the work that I do is like, I'm a people person. Like I need heart to heart connection. I need to connect the dots. Like I'm an in-person, like, so the virtual thing wasn't even an option for me. But what's really cool is to see another successful Indigenous event planning company, Jesse Stevens and Blair Hogan with Gunta Business, to really like take on that role virtually. So that's exciting to see, like, even though I sort of like left that niche market of an Indigenous Yukon First Nation planner, and it was really great to see another company go into that role during this time.
Yeah, I'm watching them work. You really see how much kind of goes into that kind of production, that dual online virtual. It's a lot.
Yeah, because you're producing two separate events, essentially, like the in-person and the delivery of the presentation, and then it's the virtual piece, like behind the scenes. But it's really cool to see. I really like seeing the success of like businesses that really, you know, just really turned it into a success rather than just being on hold and like waiting and things are going to change. It's just like, you just got to like pivot, you got to move forward and just do what you can do during this time.
And we've all had to pivot or adapt, aspects of our business model. Which ones are you most proud of in terms of what you've sort of shifted and what you've done?
Well, it's a long story, but it's exciting one. So there was a lot of projects that I always, and it's not just me, there's a whole team of people, and thankfully with the support of YFNCT and Charlene Alexander and the board that really believed in the vision. And I think about just before COVID hit, just before, I always talk to Charlene about it. I always wanted to create another performing arts show, very similar to what we did and produced for the Olympics. So back in 2010, we had 45 performing artists from each community to weave a story of who Yukon First Nations people were. And that was 11 years ago. And I was like, what a cool model. Like we had a year of working with artists, training, mentorship, creating space for work to be created. This was even when COVID didn't even exist, but I knew that model worked. And Charlene and I were always like, wow, that's so cool. And I always was like, is there a way for us to do it again? And as you know, the visual arts has been like exploding in terms of First Nation fashion and jewelry. And that has always been a very steady climb, and it's continuing. But we wanted to create space for performing artists. So like storytellers, singers, drummers, emerging artists, like really creating space for artists to really create their work. And so we were able to get seed money and then that's when, COVID hit. And there was a time where we were like, can we really do this? Because can we bring artists together? And at that time we weren't able to. And so, but again, it was like I knew, and the team. So we hired Alejandro Ronceria, who is this incredible choreographer, director based out of Toronto, and I've been working with him since the Olympics. And then Diet from Burwash, Diet's from Kluane country, an incredible singer-songwriter, mentor, community leader. So we brought them together as directors for this like new concept of creating this new story with these new artists. And of course, we have other people like Patty Flathers, who's the founding member of Gwanduk, or co-founder. And then of course, the strength of like Charlene Alexander and our team, because it was like, is this possible? Is it possible for us to do this while COVID? Because you have to convince funders, you have to convince leaders, you have to convince the artists that it could work, right? Mm-hmm. So in October, we were able to get seed money. In October, we did like a call for artists across the Yukon. And we had, I think, about 45 submissions. And so, of course, we reviewed them thoroughly, but we also did like interviews with artists, like, are you interested in creating some work? And so it's a process where it's like, it's not about the show. It was really about supporting and putting a blanket on our artists. Like, what do you need? What kind of resources do you need? Like vocal training, even like rehearsal space, right? Like these are some of the things that you think is not that big, but it is, right? There's not a lot of space here in the Yukon. And we just did one-on-one. So Diet and Alejandro just did one-on-one work with each artist, like individually. We weren't able to bring everyone together. And so that work continued from like October until now. We're actually going into our last phase of rehearsals. And the actual group of collective of artists, they haven't even come together yet, but the restrictions are over now. And so we plan on bringing like the whole like collective of artists together to premiere Dreaming Roots. That's the name of the show, which is going to be a 90-minute showcase. We have close to 50 performing artists, actors, storytellers. That's going to weave this incredible story of Yukon First Nations, past, present, and future. We have 3 incredible storytellers, Christine Genier, Gary Johnston, and Melissa Frost from Old Crow. And they're going to weave this incredible story of resiliency and hope and love and strength. And they're going to weave the story with these incredible pieces that were created during COVID. Yeah, I just get goosebumps about it because it's like, we could have just parked it, but again, this work is like so powerful, and it's so important that we continue this work so that we can for the next generation of performing artists. That was long, but it's such a crazy project during COVID, but maybe it wouldn't have happened. So like I really try to look at the positive, because it's one of those projects where you have to put a lot of heart and soul in, and if you don't, you needed the time. And so we as cultural leaders, producers, we had the time to really like sink our teeth into it and create that momentum. And so that show is going to be the welcoming show for the Arctic Art Summit that's going to be hosted here at the end of June.
Okay. That gave me goosebumps while you were describing it. And I think, yeah, I mean, that opportunity for reflection and building it in a slightly different way than you would have normally has maybe led to something even more transformative.
Well, not just transformative for the artist, but I think this piece is going to be transformative to the world. Like we're welcoming the world here in the Yukon, and it's going to be they get to experience that and take that back to their countries or their communities or their families. And there's going to be all messages of like, I think we all need hope right now. We all need to be like, there is a future out there. And really it's our story. It's our story that's going to be told. Again, it's not just one person. Like we have this incredible team of like creative, that we have lighting designers that have taken part, sound engineers. We have this incredible like team of people that's like just building this show for the artist. It's about the spirit of that artist. Like what can we do to really like give them the best of the best, like a world class, like it's their time to shine. And it's that time for us to like I guess it's so cliche, but like coming into the light, right? And that is what Adäka means in Southern Tutchone, is like coming into the light. Like we've been in the dark for so long, and it's time for the light to come back.
What have you learned about your business model over the last 2 years?
Business model. I don't know if I ever had a business model, Carrie. Like, honestly, like, I'm a people person. I am a connector. I'm really just a facilitator when it comes to like people and energy. Like, I'm really big on like the flow. Like, I create experiences. That's what I do. I mean, there's a lot of work involved in doing that, but I think for me, it's like what I learned through this whole process and event planning is just being patient and knowing that, and also just taking a step back and reflecting on even yourself. Like, I know that there was moments during this time where I'm like, is this the work that I want to continue doing, or do I want to make a shift? Not in a bad way, but it's like you really like look inside and be like, do I have more to give? And one of the things I think through this pandemic is you are more grateful. Like, I'm finding already more grateful for gatherings, more grateful for connection. And people are reconnecting again. So it's so beautiful to see, and not taking anything for granted. Like, I think we all have been there where we're just like, you just take things for granted, like going to a festival or going to a concert, or but when we didn't have it for 2 years, it's like it really puts things in perspective and just be like, okay, like just live your like best life and continue that on. And it really, like, I spent more time with of course, I have my daughter, Isabella, Bella, and that, just time to just be more present with her and just be locked in the house with her a few times. And I mean, that's so cool, right? Where you're just like, you got to slow down, like slow down. And that's one thing. So I don't know if it's a model. I think if anything, it changes. This pandemic has changed me as a person, but in a good way, right? It's like in a way of just pacing and prioritizing what's important. I think through this too is like, now as I proceed and things are opening up, and evaluating projects and events that have impact. And that's the number one thing, is like, is this event going to have impact to the community? Is it going to have impact? What is the intentions of this project? So I'm very mindful of that. And it's important that for me, that it's aligned with my values, like who I am as a person, who I am as a Yukon First Nation person, and who I am as like a business owner as well.
Did you access any of the pandemic related supports? There were some at the federal level, the territorial, like the sick leave benefits or anything like that?
Not for my business. I think because I already had a committed relationship with YFNCT, that thankfully I wasn't one of those businesses where I was like sinking, where I was like, thankfully, right? Because I was still able to do what I love to do through another vehicle. And that I'm so very forever grateful that I was still able to do the work that I'm so passionate about through YFNCT, and still have impact, still support communities, still support artists through this time.
Did you notice any gaps? Like, were there funding opportunities that weren't there, that were needed, that you saw in the community or for your business?
Well, what's interesting that you say that. I mean, and of course, what's so great is our tourism department at YFNCT really helps and supported Yukon Indigenous businesses during this time. And there's about 12 businesses here in the Yukon. Some have been running for 20 years. Some are like, they just started, or they were supposed to launch during the pandemic. And our team there at YFNCT, they're just so like we were totally tapped into all the funding, making sure that all the businesses got the information, so there was no gaps, because that information was always shared, and YFNCT was always the conduit, like making sure that they had all the information needed for support. But we were always so optimistic, and like you look at different parts of Canada, and it's like the because it did the growth of Indigenous tourism in Canada, and like some businesses did, definitely this pandemic was not good for them. But I think in the Yukon, and this is my perspective, just based on like my observations, is some of our businesses really flourished because they were able to create like professional tourism websites. They were able to get access funding through like ITAC, Yukon government. The Elevate program, which is a partnership between TAIA, Yukon, and the Wilderness, like there's a partnership there where they joined together to support all Yukon tourism businesses. So I think from the perspective of what I saw, the businesses here really took advantage of that funding so that they can like expand their business, or expand their business in marketing or social media. So that was really cool to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some businesses have really come out better positioned for the recovery period.
For the recovery.
Yeah. Going forward, how are you kind of thinking about your business differently? Like where are you seeing your opportunity?
Like moving, like the recovery piece, or?
Yeah, through recovery and into the future.
Yeah, I used to plan my life like in 3 years, I'm going to do this. And that's one thing with this pandemic, is we couldn't do that. Everything was so up in the air, and I didn't know if it was like day by day in the moment. But it's one of those, I'm so hopeful that, I don't know if things are ever going to be like, when they say the new normal, it's like, what was that even before the pandemic? Like, I feel like looking when it's like prioritizing and spending time more on the land. And one thing that I've noticed too is a lot of my friends and community, family, the whole language revitalization is so empowering and so beautiful to see how we are having like young speakers creating programs. And my brother is actually going to be creating a program for Southern Tutchone in the next year. And I'm like, I'm gonna do that. Like, it's like recommitting yourself to a whole nother level of the work that we do. And as a cultural leader here in the Yukon, it's like I've always been like so like giving and like creating, but it's like I want to do that for myself. Like, I want to learn the language. I want to start really like for myself, so that those teachings can carry on. It's one thing to like host an event that's so incredible, and it's like the cylinder, the vessel for that inspiration to happen. But it's another to like really like get those teachings for yourself so that you can pass that on to the next generation. So yeah, I think it's like, if anything, it's like perspective and like and that whole like give and take. And I think lately I'm like, I really want to invest in my own teachings and how I can create that legacy for my daughter and the next generation.
That was kind of my next question is, have you picked up any skills to better position yourself for the new economy? It sounds like you're kind of getting ready to pick up that language skill.
Definitely. Like that's something that I want to invest my time in. The other thing that I really want to do, once I have time, once everything, after July, it's going to be, because right now we're producing Dreaming Roots for the end of June, and then we're also producing Adäka. And what's exciting about Adäka this year is because of the Arctic Art Summit, we have international artists from like the circumpolar countries. So like Sweden and Finland and Norway, like they're all coming here. And it is actually the launch of an international Indigenous festival. Like what do we want to see this festival for the next 10 years? So that's really exciting. I think it's like exploring themes of like connection around the world as Indigenous people. So I'm really excited about where that will go. So I definitely want to commit to developing the framework around sort of launching that and building a team and like passing the torch, I guess, to young, inspiring like producers and creators to continue that work. Because it's important that like this work continues. Like 11 years ago, I never thought I would be like for this festival be where it's at. And, you know, Charlene, of course, Alexander and the board, like Marilyn Jensen. And before that, like the late Doris McLean and even my father, like Joe Johnson, like this Louise Prophet LeBlanc, like there's some incredible like leaders. This is just a phase of like the work that needs to continue. And so my intention is to be that generation where it's like, we have to plant the seeds for the next 10 years. And so that's one of my like missions, is to do that. The other thing that I really want to explore is creating like personal like wellness programming for individuals from all cultures. So the idea of like creating like a wellness retreat programs on the land, so people can, you know, come to say like Kluane country and go kayaking and just be on the land and like eat good food. But then there's this whole like spiritual personal development programming involved. So when they go home, they're so impacted that they also start making change within their own community. So that's sort of my long-term goal. But right now I'm just kind of coasting the wave. Need to get through the next couple of weeks. And just really be in the moment and enjoy where we're at right now, because I feel like we have gone through it. Like I see the light, I really do, and I'm very optimistic about the future.
You just kind of mentioned some of the leaders that inspired you to be where you are now, but what have you learned about leadership over the last couple of years?
I think leadership is like always within you, right? You just have to like be sparked or inspired to like nurture that piece. I feel very blessed to be around so many leaders here in the Yukon and mentors. I'm very grateful to have my family, and of course have a really strong group of friends that are really like supporting. What I saw through this pandemic was like how those friendships just grew stronger. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't alone, you know, like I had my family, I had my friends, and, you know, I had my community. And so I feel like it's like my responsibility to pass that forward and sort of bring other like upcoming leaders to the forefront. And so I think it's just finding a passion and finding your purpose. You know, what is your purpose? And thankfully I was given that. And so I follow that with true honor and dignity and integrity. And until the creators like moves me to another path, that's what will happen. But for now, I'm just really grateful that we were able to move forward and continue this work, because it's so important that it continues. It's one of those things where it's like COVID will not, it's the whole resiliency, like COVID's not going to bring us down. It's just going to make us stronger. And that's really important, that as we start rebuilding and reconnecting and really reconnecting our relationships.
As you think more about sort of rebuilding, and you think a little bit more about the Yukon economy, and how that's transitioning. We're seeing First Nation procurement policy. We're seeing the work that you're doing in building up tourism and culture and the economy around that. What are your hopes for what that looks like for the Yukon?
Well, what I saw, or my observations in the last 2 years, is like organizations banding together and actually starting to work together and start communicating. And so I really would love to see that continuing, and especially with the Yukon government and the territorial or the federal governments. Like, we are all, it's so, we've heard it how many times, we're all in it together, but we really are. Like, we need to unify and like really support one another, because our economies, like our territory, is so small and we're all interconnected. And it's important that we all work together for us to like get through the recovery, get through, because we still have a long road ahead of us. And really just kind of, I think this is an opportunity for us to like redesign that, redesign what does that look like when it comes to like, working together and being together. So I'm excited to see where that can go. And yeah, there's no accident that the Yukon's hosting an international event at the end of June. Like, I think it's an opportunity for us to really showcase the world on like who we are as Yukoners. And the First Nation story is a huge part of that. And it's acknowledging that and acknowledging the territories that we're on. It's acknowledging our story, what the past, the present, and how bright the future is. And I think it's those teachings that are going to be like transpired into our governments, into our leaders, into our like future leaders. So that's exciting to me.
Do you have advice for those future leaders, for those emerging entrepreneurs?
Just keep on going. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Like, I mean, there's so many times in my footsteps where I'm like, but one thing that I like am so tuned into now is like, follow your intuition, because you know yourself best. And I know that, we always, in the path that we're on, it's like, if it doesn't feel right, or you're kind of unsure and you really have to think about it, it's probably not right for you, right? Like, I really feel like in the last, not just in my career, but like in my life, where you just have to trust your own self, trust your gut, trust like your heart, trust who and what you want to do, right? Because there's always going to be tons of opportunities out there, but if it's not aligned with like who you are, and if it doesn't feel right, then you don't need to do that, because there's something else better for you, right? So I feel like we're so hard on ourselves sometimes when it comes to our career choices, or are people gonna like it, or just do you, right? And I feel like if you're really authentic and true to who you are, then you're always going to succeed.
What's been keeping you grounded this last little while? What's your wellness practice?
Honestly, well, it's been hard because of course Kluane was closed. Like they just opened up. What I mean is like the community didn't want members or non-members come into, which is you got to respect that. But it's hard because that is my grounding spot, is going home to Lasänmą and just be with my community and see my family. So I'm actually really looking forward to reconnecting back home and being on the land, and bringing Bella to all our little special places. So I'm excited about that. I feel what grounds me the most is just just being with like-minded people and people who are optimistic and find the good in everything. Like I know when life gets hard, but like it's so important that we just still support one another and be kind and like because it's just one of those things where we're going into a whole different space of reconnecting and reigniting. So one of the things that has been a tagline for me is like igniting the fire, like how do we ignite the fire within ourselves in the work that we do? And so it's my like recent tagline with people. Ignite your fire.
I like it. I like it. Any final thoughts before we close out today?
No, I'm just really grateful that you asked me to come back and to sort of share my experience. And I mean, there's so many other things that are happening that are super positive in our community. We've lost a lot of our elders. There's a lot of grief within our communities. We've been through a lot. And so I constantly like say prayers to our ancestors to show us the way to sort of reignite these gatherings such as Adäka, to come back to our culture of like hosting headstone potlatches and just coming together again. And just being gentle with each other is probably something that I will practice, especially this summer as we're kind of coming back into the light. And and just like my thoughts and prayers, of course, go out to everyone that's struggling right now, and know that you're not alone, and there's people that love and care for you, and that we're still here, and we'll continue to be here moving forward.
Thanks so much for your time today, Katie. Bye.